talk with you about surgeonfish, or you might know them better as tangs.
All right, I've got my notebook. I've made some notes about the most common fish that I've seen in home aquariums and that I've seen in my local fish stores. Keep in mind, this list might vary from ones that you typically see in your local fish store, and it's also going to vary from the ones that you've seen in public aquariums, as they're going to have a lot more space and thus can keep a lot more fish. Now, one thing before I get started telling you about the different tangs, I'm going to let you know I like to break them down into two body shapes. So first off, you're going to have the tangs that are circular in body shape, and then you're going to have the ones that are a little bit more oval body shaped. This is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later, so keep this in mind as I'm going through this list. All right, first off is our yellow tang. That's going to be a circular body shape. Those are pretty common. Most people, if you've heard of a tang, yellow tangs are what you know. Next up is going to be our blue hippo tang. If you've ever seen Finding Nemo or Finding Dory, that is Dory. Now, she is an oval-shaped tang. Next up are our powder blue and our powder brown tangs. Those are more of a circular body shape. Next up is going to be the SCOPAS tang. That falls more into the circular category. After our SCOPAS tang, we have the bristle-tooth tang or the Tomini tang. Again, that's another circular body-shaped tang. Next, we have our flamingi tang. It's a fun one to say, isn't it? And that's going to be more of an oval-shaped tang. We've got purple tangs. Those are another one that fall in that circular category. Next is the orange shoulder tang. That's an oval-shaped tang. Then we've got our NASO tang. So you've got your regular NASO, you've also got your blonde NASO, and then the unicorn. That's another one of those NASO families. And if you look at the body shape, it's fairly obvious those are all very oval-shaped bodies. Then we have our kind of rare, it's getting a little bit more common, the gem tang. So those are another circular body shaped. It's a common trait of that Zebrasoma genus. So we have the SOHAL tang up next. That's another oval body shape, along with the clown tang, which is another oval shaped. Now, something to mention about those two is they can be fairly aggressive, so just keep that in mind when you are putting fish in your tank. Next up, we have the KOLE tang. So those are going to be a little bit smaller and are probably going to fit better into that circular body shaped category. Now, lastly is one of our largest tangs. That is the SAILFIN tang. Again, that's a very circular body shape for a fish. Okay, so we've talked about the different kinds of tangs and their body shapes, but something else that you need to be mindful of is tank size. Tanks and tangs. It's kind of a tongue twister there, right? All right, so you might buy these fish when they're small. If they're babies, that's fine. You can have them in a smaller tank, but know that some of these get to be very, very large. In fact, let's see, the blonde NASO can get up to 1.5 feet in length. That's a huge fish. So you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of space for them to swim around in. Tangs as a species are very active swimmers. They need lots of space. But if you've got 1.5 feet long tang, you want to make sure you have at least a minimum of 180 gallon, if not larger tank. Now, not all tangs are going to be that large. For example, your yellow tangs, those guys are going to be about 8 inches. And while you don't need a 180 or 200 gallon tank, you still need a minimum of 100 gallons for them. Now, with your smaller tangs like your KOLE tang, they're only going to get to about 7 inches, and you could probably get by with keeping them in a 75 gallon tank, but I like to say if you can afford a larger size tank and you have the space for one, give them a little bit more room to swim around. All right, next up, we're going to talk about diet.
Okay, so we've already talked about the different shapes and sizes of tangs and the requirements and the space they need, but how about diet? Diet is one of the most important things that you can do for your fish. So tangs are herbivores. Now, just because I say herbivores doesn't mean that they strictly eat vegetables. A lot of them actually do, in fact, eat meat. So when it comes down to feeding your tangs, you have what I like to consider 3 different types of foods. So you're going to have your dry foods, your wet foods, and something a little bit in between is those gel foods. But let's jump right in. So let's go over the dry foods first. Right, so as always, you have your flake foods and then you have your pellet foods. So PE pellets, they have a little bit more protein. They're really great, especially picky fish. Sometimes you can get them to eat this, or if you're going for a whole lot of vegetables, the New Life Spectrum Algae Max has a ton of veggies packed in there. So that pretty much covers the dry foods. Let's jump into the wet foods. Now, there's a lot of different frozen foods out there, and it really depends on what you're able to find. But LRS, for example, has Herbivore Frenzy. It's made with those tangs in mind, but Rod's Foods has another great herbivore blend. You can look for Ocean Nutrition. They have blister packs that are a little bit smaller. This will come in like a big full-size food, but you can get those blister packs for individual feeding if you have fewer tangs. Next up, we have our gel foods, or the foods that you are going to kind of DIY make yourself. So first up is this mastic. It comes in, it kind of looks like little gummies. So what you're gonna do when you get these is you're kind of gonna smush them, and you can stick them on the glass, or you can stick them in the rock work, and they are fantastic when it comes to providing a natural simulation of what your tangs would be doing in the wild. They're always gonna be picking at algae, getting all of that stuff off the rock work, and this is great for those grazers. Now, I mentioned DIY, so New Life Spectrum is another one of those companies out there that offers a gel mix that you can make, or Dr. Tim's has these awesome foods. They even give you the little containers, you mix it up and you make it yourself. It's chock full of veggies, a great option for tangs. Now, this is what you probably are all familiar with, is the nori and the seaweed, right? So seaweed comes in a variety of different options. You've got your red seaweeds, your greens, your purples. So there's a bunch of different options out on the market that you can go for, but one that I particularly enjoy and appreciate is Rod's 3-weed blend. It's got the red, the purple, and the green, but what I really like is that it's got the big sheets, but it's also got the shreds of seaweed. So something I didn't mention, when it comes to picking out pellet food, and this goes for any food, you don't want to feed something that's bigger than can fit in your fish's mouth. Your fish has to be able to eat it. So this offers a great option if you've got those larger tangs or those smaller tangs like those Tomini tangs, a little bit of variety for everyone. Now, I just gave you a bunch of different options for feeding, but how are you going to feed, right? So obviously, if you got the pellets or the flakes, you can do the Salt Bae thing and sprinkle it in the tank. But if you're feeding anything else, you might need a little bit of assistance. So you've got a bunch of different clips and pouches. So first off is the innovative marine grazer thing. And what you do is you put the food in here, you clip it closed, and it's magnetized, and you put it on the tank. Now, something to keep in mind with this magnetic product and other magnetic products, for example, the Two Little Fishies clip, is that these aren't going to work on tanks that have really thick acrylic or glass. It's just going to be too much for the magnet to handle. So it will usually say on the product or in the description what size thickness that you need to look for. So if your tank is thicker than that, you're going to go for something like these little clips with the suction cup. It works great in any system. Just remember, with all of these clips, you need to take them out. After 12 hours, after your fish are done eating, do not leave them in. Take them out, clean them so they're ready to go for the next time. Now, I've worked in public aquariums before, and I will say when we feed our tangs, there's a lot of them swarming about. So these feeders, like this one from Two Little Fishies and this innovative marine feeder, are great opportunities for enrichment, and your fish will love them. So you can put them in different spots around the tank if you have more than one, and it offers an opportunity for a bunch of different fish to eat all at the same time without crowding each other. All right, that wraps it up for diet. Let's move on to the next. All right, we've already talked about what good nutrition looks like for your tangs, but even with good nutrition, they can encounter some health issues. So here are some of the common ones that I have seen with tangs. Hole in the head or head and lateral line. Now, that can be caused by a lot of different things, and one of them is poor water quality. So make sure that you're doing your water test, doing your water changes as needed to make sure your fish have good water quality. Now, sometimes, even with good nutrition, those fish need just a little bit extra. So if your fish is one of those that does need a little bit extra, just consider adding some amino omega. This one is by Brightwell, but there's a whole bunch of different ones out there on the market. I like to use this one for my tang. It just gives them those added aminos that helps to boost their immune system and helps to brighten up their color. You could add some vitamins too if you'd like. I really like to add some vitamin C. If I see my fish's colors are a little bit dull, it really helps to brighten them up and keep them healthy. Now, next up is something I'm sure you've all heard of, is ick, or cryptocarion. Now, there's, again, a lot of different products out on the market medication-wise that you can use to treat them, but one thing you can always do for your fish is to dip them and quarantine them before you put them into your main system. That's going to help to keep them, one, from spreading anything to any of your other fish, and just making sure that they're healthy before they go into the system. It's a lot easier to treat one fish in a quarantine tank than it is to worry about treating a whole tank. So this one right here, Quick Cure, I've used this a lot on my tank. Just if you use this one, be careful, it does stain. Another thing that tangs can, issues that they can have, it's called lymphostasis. Now this isn't just tang specific, a lot of fish can deal with this. It's kind of like a blemish, it's fuzzy, it will look almost like ick but larger. So ick is going to be a small pinprick, but the lymph is a little bit larger and it's going to be a fuzzier mass. Typically you see it on the fins of the fish. Now, one other thing that I see often in tangs is obesity. And to combat obesity, you can do a couple of different things. One, you can make sure that they have a lot of swimming room and that you're not overfeeding them. Also, you can make sure that they have a power head. So a power head is going to provide current and encourage them to swim around. So make sure that they've got that room to swim and that you're not overfeeding. Now, something that you can do to help your fish live their best lives, yep, there it is again, I said it, is to enrich them, right? So you have all sorts of hobbies that you do that's not just, you know, your 9-to-5 job. Well, fish like having things to do. They like things to be different and to challenge them. So I mentioned earlier when we talked about feeding, you can have these different kinds of feeders. You can put them multiple places around the tank at the same time. You can, again, change those power heads' directions and flows. A lot of them, the power heads on tanks now have programmable features, so you can do on for 30 seconds or off and program those features. Something else when it comes to food, again, those gel foods or things like mastic, you can stick them in the rocks and encourage that natural foraging behavior. In fact, I leave some of the algae on the back of my tank for my tang to graze when he's just hanging out. Something else you can do is making sure you've got a lot of rock work and places for tangs to hide, especially blue hippo tangs. I've seen a lot of times they like to kind of wedge themselves into little rocky holes, just hanging out there and chill out. So make sure you have lots of spaces for them to hide. Something else you can do is redecorate or reorganize your tank. Now I realize sometimes that's hard to do when you have a coral system, but if you have a Fowler rock-only tank, it's a lot easier. You can also add artificial inserts just to give them some variety in their life so it's not just the same old swimming around in the same 100 gallons. All right, lastly, let's talk about tank mates, right? Because that could go to enrichment as well. What are the chances? Unless you're frank, you're probably going to have more than one fish in a tank, right? So if you remember at the beginning of the video, I talked about those different body shapes, correct? So we have the circular and then the oval shaped tangs. Now, this is what I was taught. It's a rule of thumb. It's, you know, there's always exceptions to the rule, but this is how I was taught. So you can mix different body shapes, not an issue. If you want to have multiples of the same body shape, you need to have more than 2. You can have 1, you can have 3, 5. You don't want just 2 because it's real easy for them to pick on each other and you'll probably see a lot of fighting. Now, if you know right off the bat that you want to have a lot of tangs in your tank, you can add them all at once. I wouldn't recommend adding them slowly over time. If you add them all in, it's going to give them time to adjust to the group that they're in and, you know, find their place in the tank. Because tangs, as I mentioned before, some of them, like the clown tang, like the Achilles tang, sometimes the SOHAL tang, they can be very, very aggressive. And once one establishes dominance or its spot of the tank, it's going to be very aggressive towards others. So putting them all in together is really going to help for success. Now, beyond tangs, they're pretty compatible with a lot of other different fish out there, but one key that I always use is the fish compatibility chart. So as you can see, you can look and find tangs on the chart, and then you can look all of the other different species of fish that are out there that you might consider putting them in the tank with. You can see if they'll be compatible with the tangs. Another good thing you could do is always ask your local fish store, but you do want to make sure you do your research before you purchase any fish. All right, that sums up this video all about tangs. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.